Hello, welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Brian Batko, one of our great Steelers beat writers. We are going to talk so much about free agency and getting you ready for what the Steelers moves are about to be. They did make a move to create cap space, but no move as of Friday morning has been made about the quarterback positions, which is the first domino that must fall before everything else starts to fall into place for the Steelers. We'll talk about that, what that's setting up for free agency, who the Steelers' top targets are, and so many different angles, all here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello, welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Brian Batko, one of our great Steelers beat writers. And as always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of the Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, like Chipped Ham and Football, a Tuesday football show that comes out every Tuesday from Brian Batko himself. And as always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Did you know that they also do workers' compensation? Well, if you've ever been hurt on the job, you know that who decides when you're better? It's not you. It's not your doctors. It's the insurance company doctors. You think that's not great? Guess what? Edgar Snyder Associates has your back. Call them today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. More on them later. Brian, let's talk free agency and where the Steelers are. And the truth is, we still don't know what the ultimate plan is or what the ultimate result is. We have hints of the plan of what the Steelers are trying to do. We do know that they restructured Cole Holcomb's contract to free up about $5 million in space. That puts them at approximately $64 million or so in salary cap space. But none of that is being spent while teams are trading. Other teams are making moves. They're starting to position themselves. The Steelers right now have what is, I think, the most cap space that they've had in decades during for a free agency period, and they haven't made moves yet. But I think it's all based on, as Omar Khan kind of noted at the combine, it's all based on who their quarterback is. They're not going to get the type of receiver that they think of until they figure that out, and that's something that hasn't happened just yet. Now, you and I have talked about this. Me and Ray have talked about this. Jerry and Ray have talked about this. We've all gone over this. This is a negotiation ploy. This is, the Steelers and Justin Fields are in a situation to see who blinks first before, the tampering period opens up where teams can start officially talking to Justin Fields. But Brian, is that the big holdup here, or is there something else we're missing that maybe we're overlooking something about these negotiations?
I mean, I don't know. I think it's just difficult when, you're a player and you're on the cusp of being a free agent for the first time, and you can hear from every team in the league to see what you're worth, and if one out there really believes in you, which is not far-fetched for a former 11th overall pick. And I know it's kind of hard for some people to square, there wasn't much of a trade market last year for Justin Fields when the Bears were looking to move on from him. That's why the Steelers got him for a conditional sixth that will end up being a sixth and not a fourth. But I think things have changed from last year to this year. Number one, he went 4-2 as the Steelers starter, and then kind of beneficial to him in a way, didn't have to face the Ravens or the Chiefs or the Eagles down the stretch. He got to kind of rest on that record that he put together against some good teams in their own right, but we didn't necessarily recognize that at the time. And the Broncos, the Chargers coming to mind. So he changed the perception of himself a little bit, I think, getting away from the train wreck that is the Bears. But also, this is not as strong of a draft class as there was last year. I think it's, more, there's just a different calculus now with quarterbacks around the league. So I think that has changed things a little bit for Fields too. Now there's not going to have to be draft pick compensation. There's going to be the opportunity for a team to, decide what they think he's worth. So, I think there's a difference between Fields at this time last year versus Fields at this time this year. And it's always the case where guys who were drafted highly, they're going to have just an inherent higher value for longer in their career because they do have the physical traits and the attributes that teams covet, and it's hard for them to give up on that. So the Steelers, they allowed it to get to this point where now, yeah, he'd probably sign with them if they blow him away. But if you're Omar Khan and the Steelers, you don't want to overpay for someone who, yes, went 4-2, but it's still a 6-game sample size. So
Right.
that's why I think it's always tricky to bring back a guy who is about to become an unrestricted free agent. They didn't get that done a year ago with Mason Rudolph. It's not exactly the same situation, but again, that was someone who finished the year pretty strong. There was a lot of discussions of what his market was going to be, and should the Steelers try to lock him up before he even gets there. Well, it wasn't that great. He goes to the Titans for a 1-year deal. I think Fields will probably have more suitors than Rudolph, and we'll see where this leads in the quarterback musical chairs game around the league.
But I think that's part of the equation too here, right? Like, this is like, whereas, Justin Fields and his agents, they have the cards on their side that says, like, the Steelers need to want to find a quarterback who could be a playmaker. They have one in their and they can go get money somewhere else. But I also think that Justin Fields has a bit of pressure to be like, look, this next chance has got to be your best chance, because if he goes somewhere or wherever he plays, if he plays somewhere and things go poorly, he might not ever get to be looked at as a potential future starter again. Like right now, like is that maybe this last hurrah of Justin Fields could be the guy for this team. And if he does well with it, I think it could boost his career, whether it's with the Steelers or someone else. But if he doesn't do well with it, he may become a perennial backup, and that's not something that he I think imagined for himself when he was for a high first round pick.
Yeah, good point. I was going to say that too. I mean, I think he does probably want to go somewhere that he can feel relatively confident he's going to be the starter, because once teams start seeing you in that light as the number 2 guy, it is tough to shake that and get out of that. Geno Smith's one of the rare players who has bounced back from that, from being pigeonholed as that career backup, like you said. I think there's probably something to, maybe the Steelers could not have to go crazy with a contract offer, because I also think if you're them, you're not going to pay him more than $20 million when you could have picked up his 5th-year option. And you had less information on him at the time last year when that decision came, but that would feel like that you didn't play your cards right. So, and if you're Fields, I mean, maybe the gap could be closed a little in terms of money if the Steelers say, no, look, this isn't like last year. You're the guy. We're building the offense around you. You can go into OTAs, training camp, with assurances that, yes, you're the starter. We're not going to draft the quarterback, at least not on the first or second day of the draft. And we believe in you, full faith in you, that kind of thing. Maybe that could talk a little bit more than just the pure dollar signs. So, and if you're Fields, if his rapport with Arthur Smith was as good as it seemed to be in those first 6 games, where Arthur Smith always kind of, like to subtly say he thought they were improving and Fields was progressing and they were doing some good things. And I think we all know by now he wasn't necessarily ready to pull the plug on that. It was kind of funny. It was like he would get asked about, even once Russell Wilson was the starter, it would be like, oh, how about the way Russell Wilson throws the deep ball? And Arthur Smith's always like, well, Justin threw some good deep balls too.
he would make sure to get that in.
Yeah, he would always make sure to get that in. So I think he was kind of playing the long game that way. And I mean, hey, if you're Arthur Smith, would you rather work with the 26-year-old guy who can, really beat defenses with his legs, and I think is a better thrower of the ball than people give him credit for? Or would you want to go into the great unknown of, does Russell Wilson have any juice left? Do we want to put ourselves in the Aaron Rodgers, Sam Darnold, Kirk Cousins type of sweepstakes? So those are the decisions other teams are making too. I imagine Justin Fields seems more palatable than that to fans of the Giants, Jets, and Raiders as well, not just here in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm. And look, it's all about your value and what people see in you. And I think that's what the Steelers are trying to put in Justin Fields, is that, hey, there's value here, there's talent here. You can make this work. And so that's where I think there's a lot of equations to be figured out, but that's why it's not a straightforward thing. Justin Fields is trying to get his money, but he's also weighing very real options in front of him. So that's where that is. And I think that the thing is that with every day that this is not solved, other things are happening. I want to talk about some of those other things next here on the North Shore Drive podcast, because while the Steelers are trying to figure this out, other players are getting snatched up. Let's talk about that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. But first, I want to remind you, the show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Did you know that they also do workers' compensation? When you've been hurt on the job, who decides when you're better? Who decides when your treatment is over? And who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. It's the insurance company doctors. How does that make you feel? Well, if the answer is not great, call Edgar Snyder Associates today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. They'll fight for the workers' conference rights that you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, let's talk about the receiver situation, because that's one of the things that was kind of predicated on the quarterback situation. Omar Khan said as much when he was in Indianapolis. One of the presumed targets was Christian Kirk. There was the receiver from the Jaguars. He was a guy that the Steelers were rumored to be in the mix for during the middle of the season before he suffered a broken collarbone, and he was set to be cut by the Jaguars. But in the 11th hour, the Tennessee Titans, the Houston Texans, swooped in and was able to trade to the Jaguars for him for next year's 7th round pick, and the Texans steal him away. Now that's a very low price to get a receiver there, and I don't know if that was intentional by the Steelers, because they just weren't gonna do Christian Kirk anymore. But it certainly seems like a missed opportunity, and it kind of points back to what is going to be their plan at wide receiver, because there's a lot of opportunities out there, and last year they didn't land to any of the major free agents.
I wouldn't call it a missed opportunity. I mean, first of all, this is kind of like the Debo deal a little bit too. The Texans, from what I've seen reported, are going to pay his entire salary this year, so the Jags aren't on the hook for any of that. That's why it was such low compensation draft pick wise. And I mean, Christian Kirk, I think he's a fine player, but he's another sub 6 foot receiver. He's mostly played in the slot, at least the last 4 years. And some Steelers fans online, well, he can play outside too. It's like, okay, or you could just go get someone who actually has played outside in recent seasons, and that would be a better complement to George Pickens and Calvin Austin III and Roman Wilson if those guys are still in your plans. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of receivers out there. You don't need to feel like the sky is falling because the Steelers didn't get Christian Kirk. They clearly didn't like him that much if they didn't want to give up a 7th rounder. I assume the Jaguars would have rather traded him outside of their own division, all things being equal. And yeah, they're not going to pay that. I want to say it's like a $17 million deal.
It is that, and they're gonna renegotiate something, which is what I think the Steelers would have renegotiated had they traded for him. And like, that's the thing. I don't think it's like the end of the world that they missed out on Christian Kirk. And like, ultimately, like, and I said this on 93.7 The Fan when Dorian Dickerson and Adam Crowley had me on. I'm like, look, I think it was if that was your guy, yeah, you missed the opportunity. But it might not be the Steelers' guy anymore. They might have said, you know what, Cortland Sutton might be available, or maybe they want to go for DK Metcalf. I don't think they should for a 1st and a 3rd, but maybe they've got a plan in place that focus on this. But I don't think Christian Kirk was the end all be all, like, a situation like that. I think that this happens every year, Brian. It's why I have that and the next day Mr. Krabs meme, because one day one day you're talking about Brandon Ayuk, and then day 50 you're still talking about Brandon Ayuk, or just name a new wide receiver that the Steelers are supposedly late to getting, and it doesn't happen, and you're driving yourself crazy. And you will drive yourself crazy if you keep approaching it that way. And I think that's what happens a lot with the media talk about, what are they going to do at wide receiver? And look, I think it's urgent that they do something at wide receiver, but I also think right now they're figuring that out, and there are plenty of options out there, including the NFL draft, where I think they can get some really good guys in the 1st or 2nd round.
Yeah, I think this also tells you the type of receiver that the Steelers are looking for here.
Mm-hmm.
And I would agree. I mean, they need another bigger body on the outside, either to, line up opposite George Pickens and, stretch the field, or be able to win those 50-50 balls, kind of like Mike Williams was, even though they never really used him all that often. Or if George Pickens gets injured, you have somebody like that. So I think you want ideally a better version of Van Jefferson. You've kind of got the small, quick separator boxes checked with Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson. I'm not writing off either one of those guys. I think in the end, yeah, your receiver room is probably going to be something like Pickens, Austin, Wilson, a rookie that you draft, and the type of rookie that you draft will probably depend on who you go out and get in free agency. So I think they'll add a veteran too. And then I think they should bring back Ben Skoranek also, mainly for special teams, but he's not a terrible receiver. He had some decent years with the Rams. I think he can be that big slot type of guy who makes some tough catches for you over the middle or is used in certain game plans. So probably not going to have more than 6 wideouts on the 53-man roster. And I know you always want competition for spots. Omar Khan says that too. But yeah, that's why I think people are just a little bit over their skis about we need this guy and that guy, and why aren't they doing anything at receiver? I mean, the market is starting to fill up with names, and we haven't even mentioned guys like Darius Slayton or, DeAndre.
I think he's going
to be a free agent too.
Yes.
I don't know what he wants at this stage of his career, but I think that'd be somebody good for George Pickens to learn from, and maybe he can still be used as something of a specialist. I don't know if he can still run very well, but yeah, there are going to be options out there, options that frankly I think better fit this roster and the role needed than Christian Kirk would have anyway.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's not doomsday that they've missed out on this guy. Certainly it would have been, a neato addition, and it would have been a veteran that you could add to the room, but there's plenty of other things. And there's other priorities too. Wide receiver is not the big thing that they just need to hit in free agency. There are a lot of really good free agent cornerbacks out there. There's guys in the slot, there's guys in the outside, and the Steelers could use help at both after last year, as well as help on the defensive line. I want to talk about some of those options next year. So stay tuned here on the North Shore Drive podcast, because Brian and I are going to run through more things to get you ready for next week when free agency madness does truly get underway. But first, we'll remind you this show is also brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They're your mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda, where you can get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township, PA, or visit their website, moonhonda.com. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
We gave the all-electric Prologue EX class-leading passenger space. And we made its tech intuitive with Google built-in. Perhaps that's why we were named Best Overall EV and Hybrid Brand by Kelley Blue Book. It's nice when a dream comes together. Buy online, reserve from select dealers, or visit your local Honda dealer today.
We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, let's talk about the rest of the free agency pool here, because wide receiver is not the only thing that's out there, and there are some other really good players that are out there currently being a free agent and at positions the Steelers could address right now. I want to start at cornerback. Guys at the top of that list include Carlton Davis from the Lions, Charvarius Ward from the Niners, DJ Reed from the Jets, Byron Murphy from the Vikings, Kendall Fuller from the Dolphins. I know a lot of people really like Nate Hobbs from the Raiders as a slot option there. But to me, I think that there is an opportunity for the Steelers, if they really want to bring back their man press coverage as a staple of this defense, and get guys that can play with Joey Porter the way that Joey Porter likes to play in coverage, and make it so that teams can't just do two-step drop and fire to the open man because the Steelers can press guys again across the board. This is a chance to go get a guy like that can complement Joey Porter Jr., be a veteran, and also give space to Corey Trice to grow into his role a bit more.
I think another name that you didn't mention there, but would be intriguing, is Asante Samuel Jr.
Yeah,
who was with the Chargers. I think he was a second-round pick, and remember, I might have mocked him to the Steelers that year when he was coming out. Smaller guy, but he's played outside. He hasn't been a slot corner in the NFL. I'm sure he could bump inside if you need him to, but he's tenacious to be on the outside at that size. Obviously, you're gonna lose some battles to bigger receivers at times, but you've got Joey Porter Jr., who's the big, long, physical player on one side. You've got Corey Trice, who potentially, depending on matchups, you can get him in there. So Asante Samuel Jr. is another one I like, and I have to imagine Mike Tomlin would just be, smiling ear to ear if he had Joey Porter Jr. and Asante Samuel Jr. as his two cornerbacks. That would be like the greatest football bloodlines thing for Tomlin ever. But yeah, there are a lot of corners with NFL starting experience who are hitting the market this year. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's just kind of coincidence. Some years you've got stronger options at one position than others. I think it's a lot stronger there than it is on the D line, where the Steelers could also use a veteran. But yeah, I think that's obviously a spot where you want to add some savvy starting caliber player or players when you look at the outside and the inside to the young trio of Joey Porter Jr., Corey Trice Jr., Beanie Bishop Jr. Is every cornerback in the NFL a junior?
Sounds like it.
Yeah, so obviously the jury's kind of still out on those last couple of guys.
Patrick Surtain Jr., yeah.
Pat Surtain the second.
That's right. That's right, the second, what am I saying?
But yeah, I mean, obviously the jury's still kind of out on Trice and Beanie Bishop. So you want them to compete for their roles, but we've seen good things at times, and I just think the Steelers roster need aligns pretty well there with the available options on the open market come Monday.
Brian, do you have any of the seconds in your family?
Yeah, my wife's brother, so my brother-in-law, he's a junior. So that means he has the same middle name. Isn't there something with that? It's like you're the second if you don't have this. How's that work? If you have the same middle name as your dad, are you a junior or are you the second?
I thought we were a junior. I thought the second was just you threw that in when there was a third. I thought that was like that way
so there's functionally no difference between junior and the second.
I don't think so. I may be wrong.
The second doesn't have a kid yet.
Then maybe that is, or maybe they just think it sounded cooler.
Maybe we'll have to look that up, or if someone can comment on it. You can look it up right now. I thought it was something to do with like if you had the same first name as your dad, you were one, and if you had the same first and middle, you were the other. But I am not either one, and neither is my son, so I don't know off the top of my head.
Patrick Surtain has 3 children. Patrick Surtain the second has 3 children. Or wait. No.
I was about the kid. I mean, Pat Surtain the two. Like, I don't think there would be a Pat Surtain the third yet, right? Isn't he like?
No,
he's pretty young.
This was a bad Google AI answer. It said Patrick Surtain the second has 3 children, but it meant to say Patrick Surtain the original had 3 children because it's describing it. So I think I don't know why he's Patrick Surtain the second. Point being, there's a lot of juniors at cornerback in the NFL. But you alluded to defensive line. Let's switch there real quick because I wanted to talk about that. I also think this is an area the Steelers could go get into somebody. Now, I know at the very top of the list of free agents, there's a player that, it's Pittsburgh, baby. People here always want to do reunions, and Javon Hargrave is sitting right there at 32 years old. He's bounced around the league. He's been with the Eagles. He's been with the Niners. Now it's like, come on home. But, Ryan, I think there's some guys further down the list that if you look at guys like Tershawn Wharton from the Chiefs, Milton Williams from the Eagles. I'm not just picking them because they played in the Super Bowl, but they also both played very well in the Super Bowl.
I think Williams is probably pretty high up the list. I think he's probably going to get paid.
I do think
he's younger.
I do think and that's the thing. These guys are in their prime, but like they're not the big names as far as like the casual person would know them, but they're going to get paid. But I think those are some of the guys the Steelers should be looking at here if they want to have a healthy rotation on this defensive line. And look, Hargrave was great when you had him, and he might still be great after his injury now. But these are younger guys that you can get that can be part of a rotation. I still envision, even if they signed a Wharton or a Williams and they cut Larry Ogunjobi, I could totally see them drafting a guy in the first round on the D line, and then you'd have your free agent pickup, Cam Hayward, your rookie. And you'd have Keanu Benton, and then you could have 2 other guys behind him. But then you'd have a rotation of interior guys that could be a problem for the foreseeable future. And I think that's something the Steelers also shouldn't overlook. Again, so it's not just wide receiver, and it's not even just cornerback. There's lots of different options out there for the Steelers to fill holes because, let's face it, the D-line was a hole, especially at the end of the season when they were getting run over.
oftentimes what the Steelers do in free agency gives you a pretty good hint of what they're going to do in the draft. Because I think back to like my first year on the beat was 2019. They signed Mark Barron at linebacker, still drafted Devin Bush 10th overall. They signed, sorry to bring this name up because it was a very forgettable tenure, but Dante Moncrief at wide receiver. They still drafted Deontay Johnson with their next pick. They signed Steven Nelson that year. They still drafted Justin Lane. So they like to usually cover their bases with an experienced player and a rookie, because that way you're either getting a nice bridge to give a young player time to develop, or you're getting potentially 2 starters out of it down the road, and you're just strengthening where your roster is weaker. Now, I think if they go and, give out a big contract to a corner, I wouldn't necessarily think they're going to go draft another corner very high, but I think they're going to get a mid-level type of D lineman like that. And yes, possibly still take one in the first round, or at least the second or third. So yeah, I mean, those two things are not mutually exclusive by any means. There's already some veterans who could sign today, if I'm not mistaken, because they got released by their teams to get a little head start. Someone like Raekwon Davis, who got cut by the Colts, Draymond Jones by the Seahawks. I mean, he was more of an edge rusher there last year, but I think he's got the body type, and it's, he's got the film from previously in his career to maybe play more of a true D-line position. So yeah, there are going to be options for the Steelers. And I think the big thing is just, you either need to clearly upgrade from what Larry Ogunjobi is giving you, or get somebody who can do what Larry Ogunjobi does for a lot cheaper than Larry Ogunjobi.
I think that's the thing, is that there needs to be adjustments there, and this is their chance to do it. They have a lot of cap space, and they can get more by letting go of Larry Ogunjobi, and they can make the moves to put themselves in a position where going into the draft, their needs are a lot less than what they are right now. Across the board. So lots that can be still done here for the Steelers, lots that will be done in the coming days. Look out for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette for stuff that could happen if they make a quarterback decision. Maybe by Sunday, we'll keep you up to date with all things here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and all of our Steelers coverage from Brian, and I'm Chris Carter. You can read all of our work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. You can find this show and all your favorite Post-Gazette shows on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those daily episodes. We're back Monday getting you ready as we see what the Steelers did over the weekend and as the tampering period begins in NFL free agency. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.